All right, we'll go ahead and start the budget workshop. I don't know which number this is, 4 or 5. But, you have the budget that is current, balanced. Where do y'all want to start? We did have some discussions at the last budget meeting that we're still needing some conversations, so where do y'all want to start?
Can I just really quick, it is not balanced at this moment. It's 25 off from
Oh.
the salary corrections that I found, the rate corrections on the formulas. So 25,000 off at this moment.
Why don't we go ahead and talk about that?
Okay, what would you like me to talk about?
Wow. That it's off 25,000 and.
Yes, so I
where-
went through every page, every formula having to do with salaries, HRA calculations, our health insurance calculations, our FICA calculations, our retirement calculations, and I found errors that I corrected, and that resulted, some lines in the salary lines went down, some went up, so our overall change was 25,000, that more on the expenditure side, so we need to make some kind of change on the receipt side to cover those salary corrections.
So those changes that you talked to me about
Yes.
yesterday,
Yes, when you
I came up
Commissioner's
with
bags were in.
a little over 50,000. So there must be.
Okay, so one of them,
Is that this CARES 16,000? Is that what, was that
yeah,
not on
that's,
there?
yes, that's part.
Okay.
So since we're getting receipts out of that, the receipt side goes up, so
Okay.
that doesn't have to be found.
Okay. That gets it down to 35, so there must have been another,
Yes.
Something that-
There was a reimbursement that was changed, salary reimbursement.
okay, so, all right. So I just need to know that all of my figures are gonna be $25,000 to the good. Because I thought it was $50,000 worth of increases,
Yes,
but
on
it's
the
actually
expense side
only
it was,
25.
yes, but then the receipt side also increased. And so the difference that's not
Yeah,
made is
well, I mean-
around 25.
Yeah, I've got both sides, because I got pluses and minuses, but, okay. Well, it's $25,000 difference, okay. Okay. All right. If y'all are looking for anybody to speak up, I'll do it. So, receipts side, can we talk about the receipts side? First, is that all right? Or can we start there? And, it's one of those, I know, where you have to look at both sides to see. I know we're trying to be conservative here, but we're also trying we're trying to make sure, or at least I feel like we should anyway, be able to give those services that folks deserve for their tax dollars. So I do think that there is a tightrope there that we have to obviously walk between, okay, we know it's not going to be what it was, and so we're going to have to make some cuts, but also we can't, to me, be so conservative that we're making those cuts based on something that is not necessarily realistic. We'll disagree about realistic versus conservative probably, but that's why we're here today, I guess. First question I had, and we talked about this yesterday, would be, why would we not show I know Kevin has mentioned this a few times, but the $500,000 that we're going to receive in insurance proceeds from that?
We just got notified. When we do the budgeting, we just got that. When did you get that? We
Okay.
just got the email from Keiko last night.
Okay.
We knew that back, if you go back a year, 2018, I guess it was January or February or something, when we were talking with Keiko, we knew when we did the bids, we had the engineers go out, I think it was 1.2 million to rebuild. That last payment, we knew was around 400 and something thousand dollars. But we just got that last night.
Okay.
So that,
So it's not in here, but it should be.
Right. Well,
If we receive it this year,
yeah, that's kind of the thing, is they are,
Okay, so,
it can be,
we probably need
Good. What?
to, I would think that we would put it in as a receipt for this coming budget.
okay, so,
Right.
so it might not be insurance proceeds, but it would be added to the cash balance, the carryover.
Right.
One way or the other, it needs to be reflected in there.
Right.
True?
I spoke to Ben Barnes on April 28th, just to get the accurate figure on that, and he said that was ready to be sent out at any time. And I've got email correspondence from him on that. The recoverable depreciation amount is $496,863.61.
yeah, and just so that the commissioners, you guys understand, some of these government agencies may give us projections or amounts. Until we got it in hand, then we actually can move as far as putting it in the budget, so.
Well, we don't have most of these things in our hand that we're putting in receipts, so this shouldn't be any different.
This particular item, we've been waiting for 2 years. We knew that we were going to be getting monies, the final payment on our insurance. We just got it last night. Now the discussion is, do we want to put it in the budget or do we want to amend it? I mean, it doesn't matter to me. We've got the monies.
Okay.
How do we want to put it in the budget?
So, I know this is just a workshop, it's not the
Right.
second reading where we make motions or anything, so that's my first suggestion, is that we at least add that in, whether it be the insurance proceeds or whether it be to add it to, general fund cash balance. I don't know, I just feel like the fair thing to do is to add it in.
so if the check arrives this fiscal year, we have two options. One is to amend it in, both the receipt of it and the out of it, the expenditure of it. I don't know that we would have time unless there's a way to add it to this budget amendment that we just did, that we've had the first reading of. I don't know if you could add in between. So then the second option would be to deposit it and it be part of that carryover balance like you're talking about, and then put it in the budget next year. And then if we receive it next year, we could either anticipate it now that we know the exact amount, or we could not and amend it in when it comes, both the receipt and the expenditure. I think that since we do know the amount, that we are required to have it, because it's a known amount that we're going to receive.
Okay.
It's just the timing on those two options of whether you amend it in this year or leave it in the carryover, or the other option of getting it next year.
Okay.
And keep putting it in 21 budget.
Okay.
I will say budget amendments are more cumbersome. It'd be better to just,
Put it in this budget. Yes.
So what is the discussion as far, do we want to put it in the budget? I mean, that's what,
If you're looking for a motion,
Well, it's
I
not-
would make it, but yes. Yes, I
Guidance.
do think it is, however you want.
if you guys want this in the budget, we can put it in the budget. We just need to make sure that the next time we read the budget, we have in it what we want in it. It doesn't matter to us.
I think it definitely needs to go in there, and it definitely needs to go under insurance proceeds, because it's exactly what it is.
Okay, so if we receive it this year, I believe there's guidance on how quickly things have to be deposited, and so it will, if it comes, then it will probably be in the beginning balance instead of insurance proceeds. Does that make sense? But it will
Yeah.
still be there on the receipt side somewhere. It'll just
Okay.
depend on
Okay.
when we get it.
Okay.
But yes, I see what you're saying. So then the expenditure side is all I need guidance on.
Okay.
Okay. What's next?
So she'd already mentioned one of them was a couple of $1,000s. That's not a major, but I do know that some carryover, cash balance, whatever we want to call it, is a little different from what we had on there before. And so general fund was 970 something, 972 in that neighborhood, and it's actually 1.102. So you're looking at about $130,000 difference there.
Yes, that was my estimate. The 1.1 is my estimate of carryover that I did probably about a month ago. Since then, we've had some more expenses. I don't know that any of them have been astronomical, but that could affect it, my estimate slightly. I will say that when I spoke with Robert Brown, he gave us some direction on kind of what other counties do with carryover, and his recommendation, and his is to shoot really low. There's a lot of counties that don't use it at all. His recommendation is not to use it at all, but that he understands that counties do sometimes have to use it to cover their budget. He gets it.
He
But
al-
his recommendation is to shoot low if we're going to use it.
And he also stated not to use carryover to balance your budget. And as far as the last budget meeting that we were discussing, as far as what information that we were using to put this budget together, and I think that Erica got that, quite a bit of information to y'all to look at. DLG is a great resource to talk to and ask, what are they seeing as far as across the state? And what we prepared in the form of a budget, I would say, is consistent with what they are seeing across the state in counties and how they're preparing. Now, we all know each county is different, but as far as the actual formation of the budget and how counties are negotiating their issues, we're not off. I think he was projecting, they see about 25% in their OTA receipts. I think we did some rough math, or we had 28%.
Depending on how you're making the
depending on the-
calculation, if you're doing it against actuals or budget, which I'm not sure which one you guys have done. But
Actual.
against actuals, it's about 27 or 28, I think. And against last year's budget, it's more like 18% decrease. Robert, since he's the local, the branch manager there, after each individual state finance officer reviews the county's individual budgets, he sees it, he makes the final little stamp of approval. So he does see kind of trends. That's why I kind of asked him what his opinions are on trends. He said 20 to 30 is what he's seeing mostly, and that 25 was what he recommends. Of course, DLG doesn't give us official recommendations on how to run the county. We do that, you guys decide that. But 25% was what he said.
So I know,
I mean-
I know you mentioned several times conservative, that this budget is conservative. I just want the folks in this community to understand is that we're no different than quite a few counties in the state when we speak with DLG, that fiscal courts are looking at their budgets from a conservative lens, and our percentages are not way off when we do that. We try to make the best decisions in preparing a budget and presenting it to the court. So I just want to make sure that, that's understood. In DLG, I know we talk about the training, but they discuss this in basic budgeting training. These key points that could get fiscal courts, caught in a situation where, we have to have a budget prepared first and second reading, because it is an ordinance, before the end of the fiscal year, or before the end of June. And, they discuss that. They go into those key things that they see with the governing body throughout the state, and they give that training. And I know I've taken it. I don't know if you've had the opportunity. I mean, you're dealing with it from a more detailed level, but they see these common things. They try to advise. As Erica says, we're the voting members, the four of us. Her job is to advise us. So there has been a lot of communication in literature, and I know that she gave that literature to us to review. There's been discussions on this to help us make these decisions. And through this process, we have put a budget on the table that is in line. So I just want to make that clear. So as we move forward, we are the four members of this fiscal court, and we've got a lot of discussions ahead of us still with this budget. And I know we're talking about the receipts right now. On the OTA, looking back at 2008, just from a preliminary view, I think it's $900,000 that we reduced the receipts.
We didn't, no. I mean, we can, budget to budget is the proposal of 900,000. Actual to budget is 1.575, whatever it is, 1.6, close to it. So I understand that the 900,000 seems, but it's not 900. It's actual to budget. So
I mean, you're right. What I'm trying to say is we put a budget on the table. We're the four voting members, and this is where, the
That's
dialogue, as far as if there are changes.
Yeah.
We have to have that dialogue, so.
I feel like that's what we're doing right now. I'm not trying to.
No.
I mean, I feel like that's what we're doing, and so if we're just skip to OTA then, or not skip to it, but if you want to go to OTA, I still think at somewhere in the neighborhood of 4.7 is still more than $1 million less than actual. So it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 20% decrease, 19 to 20% decrease. I honestly feel like that's more realistic. So again, as you said, I'm only one of four. So
Can you based off of what, because I'm assuming.
can you base 4.2 off of, other than
we
2008?
We've laid that out there. The literature that she gave you guys, did you guys actually listen to that conversation of the economist? Did you look at the literature that she gave you? You guys requested that information. She gave it to you. It is really good information to listen to help make those decisions.
I've been spending my time surveying the businesses here in this county to see how they're doing. A lot of those businesses are actually excelling. Kentucky Yachts, for example, like 2 weeks ago, they had 4 Sea-Doos left to sell for this season. ATV sales are up. Car sales are good. There's a lot of businesses that are doing very good. And for us to go down $1 million in occupational tax, we would have to lose $100 million in payroll. And only 18% of that occupational tax comes from profits. So I'm comfortable at even 4.8 million on that, considering we're going to be looking at nearly 6 million. So that's my opinion for what that's worth.
Next, I suppose.
What is it,
What's
I don't think, are we wanting to raise from 4.2 to 4.7?
That's my suggestion. It's not,
We can't make a motion, can we?
No, there's no action items here. It's just identifying.
I'm comfortable with that. The other two commissioners are comfortable with it. I kind of agree with Kevin on the business aspect. Every business owner I've talked to seem to be doing well. And I'm comfortable with it.
Split the difference.
The only concern I have is that we are heavily dependent on the OTA. If the General Assembly, and I don't know what the General Assembly is going to do with our retirement, they have frozen it this year. But if they open that back up, we already know that if they continue with the 12% increase for the next two annual budgets, we're looking at roughly $400,000 increase. That we do know. We know that's coming. I know this year, when we were discussing TVA, I think it was several months ago, but the projections from the TVA assets, because of Muhlenberg County, they were losing their assets. And the way that model is set up, that there would be potential TVA monies lost. Now, when an asset is lost in the state of Kentucky, the other states that are in that, I think there's about 6, those monies go to those states. There is, I think it was, I forget which state, that they said they were losing an asset so that there would be monies coming to Kentucky. But we do know that there are monies, there is debt that we are going to be paying. We just don't know when that's going to get turned back on, but when it does get turned back on, I don't want to see us presenting a budget, making decisions today, and not thinking about those expenses that are known versus the unknown. There are some unknowns out there, and talking with Robert, a conservative budget is what he recommended. I feel that this budget is a conservative budget because of knowns and unknowns. It's great to hear that some of our businesses are doing well. Josh, expressed that with one of the businesses during COVID, that their sales increased. But it's just to raise them. And I guess the question I would ask is, what are we raising them for? Where are those monies going to go? If we're going to raise them, what's the intent of raising them?
So
let's get detailed on that.
Okay, well, so the reason, though, that we're saying they are being raised is because they were being lowered.
Mm-hmm.
So I get that the thing to say is now, at this point, yes, we're raising them, but I don't know that that's a fair assessment. When we're lowering them, we're just not lowering them.
I think what the
So
good
what's-
question is, like, So if it were balanced, take out the 25,000, now you're going to have an additional, we were at 4.1 estimated receipts for, okay, so now you're talking an additional 600 to, okay, so 500 to 600,000, depending on which one you go for, that now we have to appropriate into
Yeah.
the expenses. So I think that's kind of the question Judge is asking.
I don't think that's the question that he has, no, because I think we're just talking about receipts now. and
Yeah,
we'll get to
I know.
Appropriations later. But-
Yeah,
But I said it the last time, I do not think, I understand taking 2008, but I just do not feel like that's,
Now,
okay.
Can I interrupt you for a second? And you guys requested specific information last budget meeting. She gave you that information.
What?
That you wanted 2006, 2007. You wanted to look a little bit before 2008.
Okay.
She has done her best to get you guys.
Tell me when.
I will say that we cannot go past 2008 backwards. The computer system is,
Yeah.
I don't think we can even pull it up anymore. But I actually emailed you guys saying the percentage breakdown. It's usually,
Yes.
82-17 or something like that.
That's what we received, Judge.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Okay,
You request now.
But when did we receive it?
I think yesterday after you left.
Okay. Now, when we were discussing getting that information, she was going on vacation. You guys met with her yesterday.
Which I totally
Okay.
understand.
Okay, but there was other information. I think, Kevin, you had requested some information. What she gave everybody before she went on vacation was good information. This is what's been given out across the state. It is really good information.
What information she gave me before she left, and this is nothing against her.
Sure.
People going, I mean, and I did not want to bother her on vacation because I know the stress level of that job based on my stress level during this. So, I mean, but the document that I got from her was carryover, okay? So I don't want people to think that I got some kind of 2006 to whatever. I don't even remember what my question to her was then, to which I got the answer to yesterday afternoon, was what percentage is net versus occupational? I mean,
Yes,
versus
and that's the
payroll.
question
Yes.
I set out to answer.
18%.
I hope that's what I'd answered.
Yeah.
I mean, I do have the dollar figures because that's how I came up with those calculations,
Yeah.
but that wasn't what you asked me for. You
No.
asked me for a percentage.
It wasn't.
Okay.
So,
Trying to get what you requested, okay? Trying to get all the information to make the best decision. Again, the information that she had sent out before she went on vacation was really good information. I think if you remember the email, she made her husband listen to it, which
So he's
was-
talking about the presentation that was put on by, I can't remember the association now, but the one that has the three economists, two over from Kentucky, different,
yeah, we talked about it.
yes, we talked about it for a few seconds yesterday when we were, when you guys met with us. But
Yeah.
I think that's what he's talking about. It was,
Yeah.
just for everybody to hear, it was about an hour-long presentation given, and the economists took turns discussing specifically occupational tax in Kentucky. And the overall consensus is to expect a decrease. It's hard to decide how much. They threw out some numbers, percentages. Somebody threw out a 20%, but that wasn't a consensus among all of the economists. And then just more of discussing the unknown long-term. It's hard for them to even predict. They did say that us, the local county level, we're going to be the indicators of what the impact of COVID is going to be, because we see it the quickest with our occupational quarterly information. The state, the federal, they're going to see it longer term when they get next year's tax returns.
And if you go through and read the material that, in addition to the webinar or the conversation that was given, each one of those material packets have conversations in various forums. But that information is helpful to help understand there is this unknown, and we do have to make decisions. So when I'm having a dialogue with you, and we're talking about 4.2 to 4.7, that information is ringing, that we have to be very careful because we're so dependent on the OTA. And we do know that there's some known expenses coming our way. We just don't know when. I just talked about it. And that may hit us. I hope the General Assembly, and I may be getting into the weeds of this, but the retirement in this state is already at a crippling level. And holding this off by what the Finance Cabinet put out 2 years ago, that increase, we're holding steady this fiscal year. Going into the next year, I don't know what they're going to do. But if they turn that back on and we raise these receipts and we see shortfalls somewhere else, we are right back to where, I know you say actuals, but we could potentially, I remember sitting here last year at the budget saying when things happen in this county, and at that time it was talking about a weather storm, it happens big and it is expensive.
And we had a long discussion to add $100,000 to that last year. And it was kind of like this, the same discussion, the back and forth. And not a single one of us would have ever thought we'd be in the situation that we are.
Sure.
But now, it was a little contentious last year, but we got through it. But I will say, I'm not going to have that. I don't want that used against me because it turned out 5.75 versus the 5.1. So I don't think I really don't think I'm crazy to look at 4.7 versus 4.2. Because, honestly, you didn't have that to go to when this 4.2 was initially put in there.
Right.
True?
No, I didn't, all this other information that's kind of backing that up, no, I did not at the
Yeah.
time.
So,
It was just my prediction based on what I thought could potentially happen.
I think 2008, again, we discussed this the last time, I think, but is a different animal to me than 2020. And so it was a longer sustained, you could see it coming a little bit more than what this particular issue is that shut us down partially, at least for a few months, so.
And I'm not for certain, but did we increase 0.5% OTA in 2008, 2007 to 1%? Was there an increase? Do you remember, Jason?
I know I tried to
There was
pull some old
There was
ordinances.
an increase back that time, but to try to come up with a date, I can't.
And the only reason why, because when we're looking at this, you're looking at 2008, 2009, $2 million, and then it gradually increased to where it is today. So that's the only reason why I ask. I don't know off the top of my head, but I'd be curious to know if that was 0.5% and we increased it to a full percent, but.
2008 also was a major financial crisis. Stock market drastically affected. People come to a standstill on spending. I'm not seeing that happen today. There are going to be businesses that are hurt. Some of them locally, I'm afraid, will not endure the storm. But to compare this to 2008, I don't really think we can do that. I think we're going to see definitely more of a V-shaped recovery here than a stagnant recovery that drags out. People are spending money. There's stimulus money that's been handed out to everyone. They're spending that money. Look on your Facebook. People are on vacations, buying things, and I think we're looking at a totally different scenario than anything we've ever seen. And we have no historical data to base these decisions on, so I want everyone to please understand that. If we throw numbers out, we're sticking our neck out there on the line, but I feel the number I throwed out, I've talked to enough businesses. I've spent hours and hours on the phone, in the vehicle, knocking on their doors, going to their business and just observing the traffic, the purchases, and our income's not going to be where it was, where we would like it to be, but I don't think it's going to be at a 4.2 number either.
I've asked Erica because I want you guys to understand what we've looked at over this process, and there's some literature that we have looked at where the economists actually used 2008. In some of the documentation, they're going back to the Great Recession. It's really good information, but so the OTA, you want to go from 4.2 to 4.7, and we'll get into, I guess, where you want to spend those monies. And this is from DLG. You doing that, raising those, going from 4.2 to 4.7, we're raising it to spend, if you've got that in mind. So that is also discouraged, but I just want to put it all out there. Now, we have to have these discussions, and you and I, we've talked to some degree.
Yeah,
And we disagree in certain areas.
Yes.
But I think it's fair, obviously, with citizens in the community that we do lay everything out on the table. And we'll get to that in a minute as far as that increase. But, so that's the OTA. Are there any other discussions on the OTA?
All right, well,
There was,
I've got,
did you find that?
It looks like it looks like the link that, it's actually the KCCMA. The link doesn't work anymore. So if you guys wanted that information, I could contact them directly and ask for it to be emailed to us. I know in the email I received about it, it said it was going to be up for a certain
sounds like
period of time. So it must have now been taken
shifty
down.
organization if y'all had that meeting and then they shut down their website.
Well, their website's
America.
up, it's just not on there anymore. It's been replaced with some CDC information and some CARES Act information. I will say, though, just really quick before we move on to the next receipt you want to talk about, my prediction is that with the $500,000 insurance proceeds and any change, if we're making about a $500,000 change to OC tax, we will probably indeed need a new first reading. Just keep that in mind. So we need to, at the end of this, talk about our dates again for when we want to read stuff, because I predict we will have to have another first reading.
All right.
There you go. Erica has said it's a significant change.
I mean, is it a change if we're not allowed to vote on it?
I mean, if the change ends up in, then we will need another first reading.
We have to vote on that, Jason?
But
I don't know that that's,
On another first reading?
No, a first reading. you just-
I think what he's getting at,
Well,
correct
yeah.
me if I'm wrong, is that there's been no action.
Yeah.
So therefore, there is no significant change.
Yeah.
We may be discussing a significant change, but in
I
the
don't
minutes.
Yeah, I don't understand this. I mean, because the the significant change seems like it would be from if there's an issue with the second reading and it does not pass, that to the one that passes, I can see being, I don't understand the whole first reading.
Welcome to local government versus
Yes.
state government.
Yes, I don't.
Yes.
I can't get, when we spoke with him this morning, I had called him yesterday, he called me back this morning. That's why I didn't give any of that information to you all yesterday when you were talking. I wouldn't, came to talk, but, his example was like if your budget goes from 10 million to 20 million, well, clearly that's not gonna happen here. But then at some other point in the conversation, he mentioned, as long as your bottom number, so ours is at 24 or something, doesn't change, it wouldn't be a big deal. So then that makes it seem as if he's implying any real change to the bottom line constitutes needing a first reading. I asked specifically, can you tell me a dollar amount for ours that would constitute a new first reading? And the answer is no, he could not give me that.
And I didn't say that to knock you down. I've been frustrated for 17 years dealing with stuff like this. That's the reason I said, welcome to local government versus state government.
Yeah.
That's the way state bureaucracy operates. I'll never understand it.
Obviously, we have the May 1st statutory requirement to get a balance, I do, to get a balanced budget to DLG, but, we start way back, February, March, April. We try to get things prepared so we don't run into, and I question if the way we read the statute now, looking at it, how we've done it in years past, no more than, or not before the 7-day, not later than 21 days, waiting till the last, to pay the bills in June, if that was even correct, because that was beyond the 21 days. So when you get into statutes that dictate how we have to do these businesses, I mean, it's a short window, and then you throw on top of everything else. But we are, I think everybody knows where we're at with this budget, so. What next on the receipts?
So the sheriff's fee pooling, I think, 4549, would that be, or sheriff fee collection, whatever it would be called. Where is it? In this. Yeah, but I mean.
On
Page 6 of the
page
receipt.
6, Fund 79.
I know he's mentioned within these discussions that the actual amount now is closer to 1.8 and would like to see it be 1.8. But I would just ask if we go back to the 1.6 and the difference into the 1.225, that 375,000 that's a big difference there. In talking to him a few times about it, I don't get that is those are fees that will be necessarily negatively directly affected as much as occupational tax, obviously, or some other type of tax that is on payroll. So I'm not saying that we should do the 1.6, but the 1.8, but I don't see why we would not at least keep that one budget 1.6 to 1.6 when we're, yeah.
The 1.6 from last year included the reimbursement from the school district for school resource officers, and so that is taken out of that line and put into a specific line meant just for that, that reimbursement. It's actually on page 1 on line 4566.
Yeah.
That's the 375 directly from the school plus CLEF reimbursement for them. That's that estimate, 396 is what that is.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with the 1.6. Had detailed conversation with the sheriff on that 1.8 number. He feels comfortable with that, but I would certainly feel comfortable with the 1.6 or possibly even 1.7 on that. Some of these numbers aren't going to fluctuate that much.
I think it's a good compromise.
But what he's saying, though, is that it's in there. Because it's separated on that other line, 4566 on the first page. Which was 0 throughout.
Yes, it was 0 because it's never been shown separately before. It's always just been in the pooling number.
So that'll bring that back to 1.6
Total.
total, moving that line back to the sheriff's department.
Well, no. I mean, it's just that those two numbers still add up to the 1.6. It's just like, it's like that garbage tax where it was $60,000 in one spot, and then it was moved from general fund down to its own. So legitimately, it's the same. If not $20,000 more or something like that. Okay. Y'all have anything on the revenue side?
Speaking of garbage tax, we were at 50,000 on that last year, was a budgeted number. No, that's 18. I'm looking at 3, Justin. 50,000, that's been increased to 60,000. Our new contract we negotiated with WastePath increased the rate from 2% to 5% and 6.25% for out of county. Believe the accurate number on the out of county was around 40% on that. So the amount of increase we were able to accomplish on that new contract should equate to way more than $10,000 increase on that.
I know yesterday we had discussed that a little bit when you all had come to see me, and you had directed me to contact WastePath and ask for tonnage reports. Right now, we're only getting dollar amounts, and I have contacted them, and they're supposed to be getting that to me as soon as possible. And they're going to give me a little bit of historical data on that, back 2 years worth.
Did we receive May's? The reporting period, when you first asked about that, we just passed that, I believe, back in October. So we haven't completed a full year. We looked at the actual receipts to date that we had received. May, if you look at May of last year to what was brought in at 2%, we should see a fairly large increase with the changes that we did with the host agreement in the fall. But again, we don't have that from WastePath, and that's why it's not reflected in the budget.
Are they not required to provide us with the tonnage also?
I don't think it's in the contract.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the documents that they actually used prior to, when it was at 2%, they had it on there. The document that after the contract has changed as far as the language. So that was a question that we had, but
I don't think we're being unreasonable by asking for it though at all.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. But to answer your question, we haven't seen a full year, and we haven't, to my knowledge, we haven't still received May
I don't see it,
payments.
that doesn't mean it didn't come while I was gone,
Okay.
or that it hasn't been reconciled yet.
in fact,
We-
I think there's a provision in there that allows review of records. If I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think that also
Reasonable
applies.
review of records.
I think that also applies to Jeremy. He can. Why I'm thinking last year was 30,000. For some reason, I'm thinking when we looked at that historical data.
Oh, what came in May?
Well, I don't know why I'm thinking 30, but there probably will be an uptick on that, but we don't know what it's going to be, so.
I've got one more on here I don't necessarily agree with. Our property tax actual receipts for 19 was $1,731,425. Actual receipts so far this year is $1,732,469. Those numbers are nearly identical. I talked to Mr. Henson, the PVA, yesterday on this. He sees no reason this number would go down. And we've got that at $1,575,000. Would like to see that number go up at a minimum of split the difference on that. I think it's,
I'm curious, what information are we referring to that shows that it's not going to go down?
well, I talked to the PVA yesterday, and I've been in real estate for 22 years. I can't think of a good reason it's going to go down either. The tax values of the property is still going to be there, and they're going to be paid. I think he said they had a,
Yeah, our first recap was an increase in the tax base, so not finalized yet, but the numbers will be higher than they were last year.
yeah, they've reassessed, so that the numbers will even be higher. Tony, what'd you say the rate was on collection?
A little over 98%, I believe.
98%.
But
About 800 bills left, I think.
So just a scenario, I think what's been done in years past is because it's at 1.5, is that gives kind of a cushion for unknowns and potentially carryover, if I could be more accurate. If we take that cushion out and Tony's not correct, and we do see a shortfall, we've taken some cushion or a safety net out of the budget. I just want to put that out there. So you'll see throughout the budget, and even when you look at the historical data that, with occupational tax, you'll see the numbers and varying over the years. It is, talking about government budgeting, it's a moving target, and if we're hunting monies to put into the budget to cover services as we've talked about, and taking out the cushion to cover that, I don't think that that's a conservative approach. when we start talking about the budget, the one thing in the budget that we're not talking about, and it's just been over time, is our payroll. The amount of money of our payroll, obviously, that's something that nobody wants to talk about. But our payroll is 11 million.
11,020,000, something like that. If you take out the bond money out of our budget, it constitutes about close to 70% of our budget, which was also something I asked Robert Brown, since he does get to see the budgets, what he would guess a percentage that most counties' budgets are comprised of their salaries and benefits. And he said it's usually 50 to 60%. So if you average that, let's say 55, 58. So we're, significantly over that, just percentage-wise, just to throw that information out there. When you think about, without the bond money in this budget, we would have probably a $16.5 million budget. So if we're spending over 11 million on salaries and fringe, that leaves about 5 to cover everything else. And when you think about our debt service and all of that, so that 4.5, 5.5, it goes quick as you divide it among. We have a road department that needs supplies to do their job. So kind of just keep that in mind as you guys are discussing. And, sorry, on top of that, all of our non-exempt employees can earn overtime or comp time, and we do have a significant balance of that. As people allow that to grow and reach their ceilings, we don't have that in the budget. If for some reason there was a sudden break from employment, we would have a large amount of liability to cover vacation and comp time. And that's one of the first things when I got here and started learning about the budget that stuck out to me as an accountant. It makes me nervous that we have that and we don't allow for it here. We kind of just do it on a yearly basis. I know Eddie will come to me this year and say, I think I'll have a couple of guys retiring. Let's go ahead and put that cushion in there. But what about the unexpected? What if we did have people laid off for COVID? It's just something to keep in mind. Obviously, it's not something that could likely be fixed really quickly and drastically unless you wanted to make drastic changes, and I don't think anybody wants to do that. But just keep that in mind as you guys are considering all the parts of the budget.
And that total was well over $400,000. It's 1.5 increase. Anything else on receipts? we ready to move on to appropriations?
Yep.
Before we go there, can we have a 5-minute recess? Go back.
Okay. Y'all ready?
Roll.
Before we go into the appropriations, I know Casey's here. One thing that, with the OTA, I've asked Erica to just remind the court on what potentially the federal government may do with taxes for the taxpayers.
Okay, what we kind of talked about a little bit, is if the government does any kind of, tax bracket rate reductions or allows new exemptions or anything like that, to help taxpayers because of COVID in the next year. You say you're a small business, tax return, the goal would be to lower your net profits slightly so that you could have a less of a federal tax liability. That trickles down to us, of course, because our occupational tax is based on your federal net profit calculation as far as the net profit side of it. So that's just to keep in mind. I know that there's been talks about what could happen within taxes next year. I'm sure the federal government won't decide that till right closer to time, and we'll see then. But just kind of keep that in mind. That I would think that's my prediction, is that they will try to help give it tax breaks to Americans, which would affect net profits potentially. Whether that would be a great effect, who knows? But just kind of keep that in mind. That was a little bit of a discussion in that hour conversation with the economists, that they foresaw the federal government trying to help taxpayers in the future.
Okay, so let's talk about that. So the way that you help taxpayers, they cannot, you're not at all saying that they can control our rate on OTA,
No,
right? That's not what you're saying.
that's not
Okay.
what I'm saying. What
So
I'm saying is
what you
our-
are saying is that they could potentially give a tax break to help small businesses out, which would,
Lower their net profit bottom
how
line.
would it lower their net if you are giving them a tax break?
It just depends on if there's more exemptions that are allowed to be taken off of your gross profit.
Yeah.
For tax purposes.
All right.
I mean, I don't know. And we won't know until all that comes out next
Yeah.
year. But that was just a discussion, a part of that. More of that, there's no way to tell, no way to make a guess for next year. But that was part of the discussion in that that webinar with the economists. That's some of what they were kind of throwing around.
And it's not just the next fiscal year. The information that is being discussed is that we may even see it in the following fiscal year. So I just bring that up to keep that in mind. But appropriations, where do you want to start?
I'd like to start at the road fund. Page 13. My favorite fund.
Not that you don't love all of them.
Oh, I love all of them, yes.
I don't know that was a great idea to say that was your favorite.
On pipes, culverts, and sewers, can we get by with nothing being budgeted? Wendy, Roy?
Nothing being budgeted?
Okay. Oops. How much will we need in there?
Like the other night, we just got a call, middle of the night, the culvert caved in, the road caved in, so, that's like $1,000 a night we spent,
Okay.
'cause we had a big hole.
How much will you need in there, you think?
That'll all depend also on if we're paving. If we're gonna pave anything this next year, we'll need some money in there for that. If not, then we don't have to have as much. But like this year, so far, we've spent $147,000 on culverts. So far this year. But all that depends on if we're gonna put money in paving.
So let me,
Well, the email that she sent out, everybody got that?
yeah, that's what I was gonna
Yeah.
ask. So
Yeah.
if I looked at this correct, so I took what was the first reading, okay? and then went down here and looked at, because some of this stuff that you have on here was on there, or if it wasn't on there, it might have been on there, but a different number.
Right.
If I'm looking at this right, this request not including the 300, just what's in the spreadsheet piece of it, was an increase of what's 355.3 is what I came up with. Do you know if is that
That
sound?
sounds about
Okay. So it's 355.3, that's without the paving.
I'm sorry, hang on.
No.
Are you saying 355.3 is this, the email that she just sent out?
No, this is definitely more than 350, but some of this was already in.
Yeah, some of this is
Yes,
budget.
that's why I'm saying,
He's
this
just
is,
saying-
I went through each one of these line items and looked at what was in the first reading and then calculated the difference. And the difference in what she sent us and the first reading, unless it was I don't think any appropriations changed on that. Well, no, it did, sign
Just the
materials.
sign. Sign is.
But
not
she
the-
had 20 in there, so it may be 350, but somewhere in the neighborhood of 350 additional, not including the 300 for paving. So it'd really be 650 if you did 3 paving and 355 for this, or 350.
Well, when we were discussing, when we first, if you go back to this last appropriations that we had, we were discussing about the bonds and the language for Southwest One with the boulevard and putting monies into the line with the 705 for Southwest One paving. Right now, the paving is set at 220. That difference, I think, was roughly, at that point, 320,000, if I remember correctly, to be moved into the paving. And if you increase the paving, your road materials is gonna increase as well. So it's either you spread out, and that's with the bonds. That's why in court today we had to identify which project. We didn't accomplish that. So if we're going to be moving bonds in to this line, there is a project associated with those bonds. We don't know what design we're going to go with. That 320, when we were looking at it with these expenses, you spread load that 320 over to cover these expenses. I know you're saying combining paving to try to get paving back to its original, I think 625 to the 675.
No, I mean, I wasn't saying, I mean, I didn't expect
No,
it to be
no,
that
I don't
this
think
year.
that.
But I was just saying to get it raised up to 300,000.
Yeah,
In
from
the
zero.
From 220, well,
It's 220 in there today.
it's 220 right now,
So it'd be
yeah.
80,000 more.
so it'd
Oh.
be 80,000.
Okay.
So put, how much? 80,000.
So
So-
if from the discussion of the last court meeting, if we're moving bond monies to 705, the line right below it, the DRA is 385,000. The remaining dollars is a little over I think it was 320 is what we identified, because we had finally got our bid on that project from Bacon Farmer Workman. If we move the monies in to that line, that difference, if 80,000 of that you want to put towards paving to make it 300,000, then the remaining of those dollars would go to cover expenses on here.
Okay.
And there are some things that were on here that is budgeted. I think originally you estimated 6,000 for the water leak at the building. It's 10,000. So I mean,
Well, that's because we've got 2 leaks. We've got one
Every-
out in the
everything
shop
we
and then
got
one in the
leaks.
sign room. So it's two different leaks. We only got an estimate on one and it was 6,000.
it was 6,000. So that's both of them.
So if we decided to take the 705, what you're saying is we would need to increase the road department, or take a portion of what we've increased as far as revenue. If we wanted to approve what she suggested, it would take another $115,000. If I'm looking at that right. Now, again, that's off my calculations.
With this email, we sat down and came up with budgeted dollars compared to dollars that aren't budgeted. And I think we had 347,300. So that 320, if you take the 80,000, that's additional monies that we did not account for, the 80,000. To round that up to.
So y'all came up with 347.3, partly because I think that 20,000 was actually 15 when it was sent back, so that's probably
Yeah,
part of it. So I mean,
Yeah,
we could definitely have so,
Yeah, I think it's.
okay, so it's $100,000 essentially that we would still have to find to approve what
Well,
she's requested.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
About
240's left, and
About
this
107.
request is 347, so,
We rounded it up to 28,000 as a difference, so if 80, you're looking at
okay, so, yeah,
$108,000.
$108,000. Well,
But we still have the issue, we're back to the bonds. We didn't accomplish that today. So this,
well,
I mean, and we're not meeting until Monday?
well,
We're going to have to meet, or we're going to have to make a decision on the 23rd
yeah.
on that.
Well, I can say, I mean, initially, I would have loved to have done one of those other, when we were first looking at that, absolutely would I love to have done one of those other options, yes. Now with the changes that, with COVID and everything that has taken place and with this budget, I mean, I'd be more comfortable with that, getting that to our road department and the multi-facility, and that leaves us because I think you were originally looking at more like along the lines of that $1.5 million, not the 700.
Well, in doing the math, I took the highest design.
1.8 or whatever.
Yes,
Okay.
because I didn't know what the court
Okay.
was going to decide. So
Okay.
yes, it was at 1.8. If the
Okay.
court were to have chosen the 774 or whatever the lower one is, then that does give monies to do what we were discussing.
Okay.
Because I know from that meeting, that was the intent, but when we went back and looked, we were like, wait a minute, we haven't, as a fiscal court, made a decision on the design. So we still have that administrative action to take. But yes, that would allow the monies to do that.
That will be, I can go ahead and say that'll be my vote to do, but I mean, I know we've tabled it, so.
Have you talked to anybody about that second leak out there?
The maintenance crew came and tried to fix the other leak. That was estimated at 6,000, but it's still leaking.
You seen that guy that just puts it on his boat and just nothing happens? You ever thought of that? Flex
We
seal?
could try that.
Times are tough. That guy looks, I mean, it works for him.
Yeah.
I mean, you trust that they're not lying to you, right?
Everything's true.
Everything's good on TV.
And just so, this email is the road department office supplies, we had that budgeted.
Yeah.
Employee training, we had that budgeted. The building repair for 2 leaks, cleaning supplies, road materials, pipes and culverts and sewers, 100,000, sign materials, I think it's 15, but we're gonna put 20 in. The required physicals, that's in the budget. Parts and repairs, 140,000, we had 25,000. And then, snow equipment and, safety equipment, which, we just moved the travel. I think it was 3,000 from travel that we moved down to safety, and that's a difference of 15, so. All right. What's next?
The building inspection, Casey
Yes,
would like to talk
Casey.
because he needs to get back to his office.
Yes. We read the letter today, from Bill, so.
I like your department too. I didn't mean to show favoritism to the roads.
It's okay, it's okay. Where would you like to begin? What I believe the board was partly conveying was they don't know that the budgeted receipts that we currently have in place, like 143, won't cover the estimated expense to run the office. They believed that it needed to be higher to cover the office. So that's kind of where we're at, is estimation of receipts.
Looking at Bill's letter, given the 80/20 model approved by the fiscal court in terms of the contracts, I mean, that's really where, if they are going to have receipts, 260, not 143, as indicated in the first reading of the budget. And I take it that the interlocal agreement, the other board members are not going to recommend to the cities.
I believe, from what I can understand, is they're not taking any action yet until they can get some guidance from the court.
Gotcha.
After they just felt like they've identified an error in the budget that needed to be addressed or attention given to.
What data do you use to determine that the commercial building will be down?
That was based upon just, I think it's our first budget workshop. We had to come up with a rough estimation. At this time period, we can see that there's not been a large drop-off of construction. There has been a slight in commercial. Residential, there's hardly been any change. So if we wanted to adjust residential permit fees, I would, in my opinion, I would feel comfortable estimating like the average of what it's been in the past few fiscal years. But all I can do is I just want to put numbers in front of you, what those numbers are, as what you can see. If you feel that that's the route to go as far as residential, I think that would be fine. The commercial numbers get skewed based upon large projects. That's something that needs to be considered. Let's see, last year,
And then the electrical, you kind of, well, no, it's quite a bit of a drop in budget to budget. But
and
it's,
that's, sometimes that can be just one project.
Yeah.
When we have such massive projects that are
Calvert.
undertaken at Calvert City, those fees are large. And the school's renovation project that was massive. So just one large commercial project can take out, $34,000 on that. So it really can fluctuate. That's something that I was going to ask opinions. Do you think that if we wanted to take out the outliers over time, that would probably give you a better estimation of what the commercial could do?
Talk to my brother-in-law, he was over maintenance. I don't know that they have, if Westlake or those guys have another large,
There's nothing coming, as far as we can
that
tell.
you
there's
know,
nothing
yeah,
coming.
okay.
And if it's one large building is not gonna make a difference.
Yeah,
It's gonna be a large project, like the high school was a 2.5-year, 3-year project. That's a large project that would really skew these numbers.
mm-hmm,
The re-outfitting of the old Gradale steel mill, that is currently skewing these numbers. When you have one permit fee, it's over 60 grand, that can really mess everything up as far as predicting next year.
Is that number reflected in here? You just said 60 grand on that one permit?
I guess I don't know what you're looking at.
On the refitting at Gerdau, is that number reflected in these receipts?
When was that money received? Or has it been?
I think it was received Monday, so no.
So no,
it
it's
would
not
be.
reflected.
So that number's up that number's up from 75 to 135.
You can take an average across the board without, and then you could almost set yourself up for a failure when a large project doesn't
Sure.
come along.
Sure.
And that's my question to pose to y'all is, we can do the math either way.
One thing that I think is important to bring up, we briefly discussed last court meeting, I believe, or budget meeting, the CARES Act, the allocation per county by population. I think ours was a little over 1 million, and that's from March to December. One of the things that we had discussed is doing a resolution from March to the end of June. We did some math. It's roughly $500,000, a little over 500,000. Since these are federal dollars, they are required to come back into the budget. And I don't know if we got that. Do we have that identifier, that classification on there? The
It's
07?
required to come back into the 07 grant budget.
We put that in here.
No, we do not have it budgeted for.
No, the classification. Didn't we put the classification, the 07? It's in here?
Oh, yeah, it's in here.
Okay.
It's set at 0 right now, but yes,
Right.
we have it in there as a placeholder ready.
So the funds that, in this case, the occupational tax funds, we're so dependent on that. Talking with DLG, those monies, when they are, if we do the resolution from March to June, into June, we get $500,000. Those monies have to come into the 07 classification line, and then we can reimburse the OTA line. That, I know we were discussing increase in the OTA receipts, but I think in situations like this, we really won't know. I mean, we got options. You can either look at the contracts that we just approved, make changes. We're still not really fixing the problem because we really don't know. But to some degree, we could do that. The dollars going into the OTA, we could use when we have issues come up throughout the year. We can use those monies And we can actually even look at with the OTA, I know we're talking about increasing from 4.7 to 4.2 to 4.7. Those monies being amended in, we could use, obviously to put back into the OTA account. But correct me if I'm wrong, the contracts that we have is really the only place that we can make some changes. I mean, you were sitting in the
My
meeting, right?
insight, Yeah, that's all I can see.
Yeah, it was either.
I'm not going to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
That
So-
or you have the fee schedule, you have the way, once money comes in, how is money allocated out?
Yeah, I think we just talked about the receipt side, and I think the fees that are already approved are consistent with the states, and I don't think we wanted to go above and beyond that. So I think that was appropriate, but it was the discussion on those two contracts with the inspectors, and then obviously the cost sharing with the cities.
The cities.
But I mean, see what you have is that, that receipt of 143.3, and then what we put in on the building inspection fund appropriation is 143.3. But what the board and Casey has developed is what was your total? 260?
I didn't do that backwards math right there.
Okay.
It's whatever it would take to cover.
To cover just your expenses and the.
Expenses,
Yes.
which are $52,000 is the
Yeah.
estimation.
So we went through those, we just went through the office expenses, taking out the inspector's kind of one of those moving targets. You don't know what that's going to be. But the more you generate, the more you're going to have to pay out. So I think they've done a good job on their office operations to cut it as much as they can. The variation is going to be in those contracts.
So with this particular account, as Brad just said, the inspector fees, the contract is one area. The other would be to take in mind that we do have, what is it, $1 million? I read that off. I think it's $1 million. I don't know why I'm thinking 58, but it's just a little bit over $1 million. It's less than 1.1 that the CARES Act we would be eligible for reimbursement. And we can reimburse the OTA account with those monies to navigate some of the unknowns within this budget. So that's something else to think about. There's still discussion with, I think, at a later date, a side discussion needs to be, with the building inspection interlocal agreement. I know that decision was made. I'm assuming, I wasn't present, but I'm assuming it was, at least what I've been told, is we didn't want to wait on the state when it comes to inspections down at the plants. That was the best way that it was explained to me.
I wasn't privy to those conversations either.
But here we are, and if we look back at, just some prior interlocal agreements when the municipalities and the counties have gone into, we get into a situation where who's going to cover the shortfall? So. Any thoughts?
I guess the 263, let me just make sure that I'm understanding exactly, you mentioned backing into it. So what you're saying is initially on this first reading, it shows 143.3. You're saying that if you added the 52 to that, it would take at that 80%, 260 to wash. that what we're saying? I mean, that's the only way I can get to 260 with
Yes.
that number seems at least relatively close at the 80/20. Okay. Still doesn't really tell me what the shortfall is. I mean, that's the,
I think it comes in those
doesn't.
contracts. You know, those, I think your percentages are too high on the contracts we have with the inspectors.
okay. All right.
And part of one of the contractors, you cover, there's a stipend, there's a mileage, so that's above and beyond his 80/20. So you factor that in, you're probably closer to 90/10. So I think that's where where you can find the discrepancy.
Yeah. Which cannot be resolved until when, what's that, what did we, is that through the end of the year?
On the agreements,
Wasn't it through budget year? Or
I
was
think
it?
yeah, you can change it
Oh,
anytime.
well, it's within a
60
30
days.
day.
60 days is on, 30, I'm sorry, 30.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
But I think
mean-
part of that conversation too is that the building code board needs to be involved probably with
Yeah.
that conversation. They probably need to be a
Absolutely.
third party in that agreement.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what they were saying. They're like, well, you know, we weren't privy to those
Yeah.
contract negotiations. So they were all in favor of that, and they were in favor of renegotiating those
Okay.
contracts, so.
okay.
All right, what else?
Well, the sheriff's budget, I assume. Time to.
Where? Last two pages.
One to see.
If I turn my dang thing right.
Or I guess a school resource would be the place to start first. So I think it's obviously that publicly we've all stated as three commissioners that we're not, or that at least, I'm not, let me not speak for the other two, not comfortable with that initial proposal. I guess since then, you have a new proposal.
Well, I'm going to say first that I've been contacted by several people that were misinformed as far as what was in the budget. And, you know, I appreciate those who have reached out and talked to me. There were people in this community who thought that I personally had defunded the school resource officer program, which is not accurate. As we discussed earlier, those receipts were moved from the sheriff's department receipts into a specific line. So I really do think that that was misled, and people in the community, you know, came up to me, communicated to me. I've had educators send emails, please don't defund the school resource officer program. So that misrepresentation as far as what was in the budget, I want to clarify, as we've identified today, it is in the budget. The $375,000 that is appropriated for school resource officers is still there. So what was built around the 375 was, that's in the budget, is 8 officers that are currently there. Those positions, 1,400 hours, which equates to 176 days, 80 hours of the required training, and the 100 hours of overtime. So that is what's in the budget. You know, this issue of school safety and school resource officers, we all want to see, I mean, 2 years after that tragedy, to think that I would sit here and not fund school resource officers. One, it's not fair to me and my staff, and two, we're trying to make it better as far as the funding. When you look at how much monies that we're putting into the school resource officer program, can we get to that magic number of 11 as far as putting school resource officers in each school? And I feel the answer is yes. And that's what it comes down to. We have discussed all day on this budget shortfalls left and right and how we're going to negotiate these shortfalls. It is real. We can't hide behind the fact that there is a real discussion with what we're obligated to discuss, and that's the budget. So as we move forward, yes, I feel that the monies are there, and if the fiscal court wants to participate, it can be done. Who manages it? I don't care who manages it. What I put in the budget was what the school allocated. And if we look into, the sheriff's own school resource officer written policy, the retired school resource officer agreement, and the same hours, 1,400 hours, 80 hours of training, and 100 hours overtime, and it even states specifically a salary that individual officer would make. It can be done. To not have these discussions, I think we're not doing our job. Is there, I know we had a meeting, there's other community leaders in this county that could participate. We talked about the foundation, the key thing for Senate Bill 1, to where people in the community, if they want to make donations, you heard Brian speak today. I spoke to him last night. That is one thing that him and Teresa want to see done, is some type of a foundation. We can get this done. And there are people that would make contributions to help when it does come to school safety. But to not have the discussions as far as how it's affecting our subsidy and our budget, I feel that as an elected official, I wouldn't be doing my job. And You know, is it emotional? Absolutely, it's emotional. But we can't have those discussions. So as we move forward, you know, that what's in the budget right now is simply what the school has allocated for the school resource officers. And this matches for 8 school resource officers as it is in the budget. When I read your policy after the fact, I saw that the same numbers and with the salary that you put in for the agreement for the RSRO, we could, with the monies that we're committed to, have 11. So there it is. That's what's on the table. The decision that this fiscal court's going to make is how are we going to move forward with funding school resource officers. And I want to be clear, when we're talking about school resource officers, you know, some of the school resource officers do work that 176-day contract. Others are on year-round. And that's where you see the biggest expense, is keeping those resources year-round. So I just want to make sure that, you know, folks understand that. But at the end of the day, I think that this has been misrepresented as far as it not being funded when actually the monies are still in the budget. So whatever the court wants to do, I want to see it be successful. But we have to balance, after everything that we've just discussed today, we have to balance how we move forward in funding this. And it really is an issue because decisions that we make today will eventually could affect us, you know, in the next 2 fiscal years as we reach out and listen to, you know, economists speak about how this is going to affect us or the material that they're given to the local leaders in the state. We can't ignore that. So that's where we're at.
I don't think we haven't not discussed it at least since it was, when I say we, I'm saying the community. It's obviously, you mentioned, you know, last time, you're putting that out on the table. You did. We asked for feedback, and we certainly received feedback, quite a bit of feedback. Now, I don't disagree with you. Some of the folks I talked to, would say this was not going to take SROs out, and I did see where folks were saying that. It's not,
I think it
understand
would
that.
be fair to say that most folks, because of some people putting out information, most folks, just hang on, most folks were, the folks that had actually reached out to me were under the impression that it was being defunded. And the issue is, you know, we just sat here and discussed where we see shortfalls, and we're talking about raising OTA receipts. We're talking about making decisions that could affect us in the next 2 fiscal years. That's not long-term sustainable budgeting. I mean, if we're going to talk about putting something in place that is going to make sure that the school resource officer program doesn't get caught up in a budget situation, those are the discussions that we have to have.
I agree.
So,
That's,
as
community to speak, because we're being accused of misrepresenting things, and we have put out what you put out, and that was that you were cutting the county portion of the funding, which means our program, as it is today, will change. And whether or not you want to say that the SRO program would not be cut, we would not have the same officers that are serving today in our schools under your proposal, and that's why we're saying that this needs to be discussed. Not in a closed-door meeting with Sheriff McGuire before you decide you're not going to sign a grant, and not after you wait for months knowing that they're putting a grant together, and not after the community has this program in place that you decide you have a superior alternative, but bringing everybody to the table and discussing if there's money that needs to be raised Who's gonna raise it? Give us the opportunity to raise money before you just say you're gonna cut out the county portion of it, and let us have some ownership in it. But the way that you went about this is wrong, and that's not been misrepresented, not one bit.
Well, when you read Senate Bill 1, it does state who is responsible. And it doesn't state that the fiscal court is. Now, the funding mechanism is there. Senate Bill 1, the folks that testified for Senate Bill 1, they knew that funding was going to be an issue. They knew that this right here was going to happen at the local level. There was no way to avoid that.
But
Hang on.
$116,000, we're talking about $116,000 to keep our program as it exists, and you think that we can't find that in the budget? We can't find that in the community, $116,000? Of course we can.
The
We get to get that
issues,
chance.
okay. If we have a budget that we have to prepare. I'm not going to get into tit and tat. The end of the day is that we have an overall budget. This is one segment of our budget. The budget as it's presented has $375,000 that the school is funding for the 176-day contract. We put a budget in place that shows 8 positions, including a supervisor's position, for $375,000. Now, the way that the budget, as far as under the sheriff's department, it's costing us more. If we want to continue paying that cost, and the court can make that decision, I want the court to look at the fact that we can meet not only the schools go, but Senate Bill 1's go. We can put a school resource officer in every school, and you can have 3 at the high school, as the school has discussed, for the exact same monies that we're putting in today. To not have those discussions
What about the
is
COPS
not,
grant? We
is
didn't
not,
have that
is
discussion.
not
Did
having.
you all have a right to
Listen,
know about the
listen.
COPS grant?
Hold up a
Well,
second.
if we want to
No,
talk
no,
about
no.
transparency and having conversations,
listen.
then let's talk about that. Did you know about the COPS grant, Monty?
Not until afterward,
Did
but
you, Kevin?
Not till afterwards,
Did you,
no.
Justin? You made that decision on your own.
I did. And,
Okay,
and
then
look
let's
at
talk
what
about
we're,
transparency.
look at what we're discussing right now. Okay? And I'm not going to sit here, all right? When that was presented to me, it was also a request for almost $1 million increase. Guys, this was an issue that, this was a budget issue. There were some other issues, but this was a budget issue. And since we've had the discussion, there's been, stuff put in the paper, and I don't know who's been involved, that there was a continuation of the request from the federal COPS grant program. I haven't been presented anything. There's nothing been discussed by anybody as far as funding that COPS grant if there was a continuation. And I'm not going to, that's a distraction, I'm not going to get to that. Right now,
Distraction, it's
with the amount of monies,
That's not a
the amount of monies that we are spending right now, we can put 11 officers in our schools.
And what about the money
And
that's spent on
that is
911? What about
what
that?
the conversation needs to be about.
That's what the conversation is.
Well-
You just don't want to hear it. The community is telling you what we feel. They've spoken out.
Monty has expressed his opinion on that, and I did mine earlier, and that hasn't changed. I will not waver from that. I want the SROs left under the authority of the Sheriff's Department. I want the line moved back to the Sheriff's Department. This community deserves no less than the finest officers we have to offer for our schools, and I'll settle for no less if it means voting no on a budget because that one thing, then I'll absolutely vote no. I'll not settle for any less than that. Our kids deserve no less than the best we have to offer. And in my opinion, it is the fiscal court's responsibility to take care of our kids and protect our staff.
Do we want to talk about 8 or 11?
What do y'all want?
well, you and I had the discussion the last time about, and I'm used a word and we went back and forth a little bit, and that's quality, and whether that's the correct word or not, I still do not, well, number one, I don't believe that there's 8 out there that are going to work for that pay, but I certainly don't believe 11 will, and I think that's why we have to do it the way that we were doing it before. Do I want the other 3? I certainly do. But I think at a minimum, we take that off and go back to where it's under the sheriff's office, same 8 guys, same budget.
I agree. I talked to you last week at length. I come down there, we talked till we was blue in the face at times, but, you know, I think it should remain with the sheriff. I've spoke with several folks, Superintendent Lovett, and, I think it should remain with the sheriff.
So with moving the $375,000 back to the sheriff, where are the additional dollars coming from?
Well, I think I don't have, you all could tell us what we did with the potential increases that we talked about in revenue.
I got a little, it was 625, 625,000 was the increase in the receipts, and that's just,
Well, that wouldn't have been 625.
it was 500,000 in the occupational tax, and then it had, with the property tax, it was 1.575 to 1.7.
And the insurance proceeds,
Insurance,
which however that is.
496, that's
Well,
nine.
I didn't put that in because I didn't know,
That's
I didn't know that was a discussion yet.
The discussion for the insurance premiums was to be put into the budget, but not where it was going to be appropriated.
I was just keeping track of
Yeah, we didn't, at that time, didn't decide where to
Are
appropriate
you
it.
wanting to use those monies, the insurance monies?
I thought it was
Why
going
would
to
we
go back
not?
into the building.
Works for
Why would
me.
we not?
Well,
Well, guys, if you know, again, in those materials, and I'm just going to tell you, read the material. Read it. She gave it to you. It's got good information in it. If we spend our cash and we end up in a situation down the road, we're going to be right back to this situation that we're in right now. I want you to understand that we have a fiscal responsibility with this budget. The amount of monies that we are increasing, we're narrowing that gap. We're taking away our safety net. You have the CARES Act, like I just said. It's $500,000, and $500,000 is going to go quick. You just heard, you know, the road department where they had a culvert go out. I mean, I said this last year. When we have issues, the issues are costly and they're big. To use the insurance monies to cover this fiscal year expenses, we're not going to have those monies next year. Where are we going to pull the monies? That's what I'm talking about. When we're talking about sustainability with some of our services that we provide, I don't think that that's making a wise decision to spend those monies. I've said this before. You know, one of the things that we could do is we could pay off the IDA land property. That will then turn TVA dollars that are in that 6% to those 39 counties. This year it's $153,000 towards our bond debt service. That would free up $153,000. I mean, we can't just because we got a check that's coming in, spend it. We have to look at where can we actually bring monies to the table on this.
What's the figure? What are y'all?
if we did it right.
So if you bring in the 500,000 of insurance proceeds and you bring in the 500,000 of occupational tax receipts that you're wanting to move it back to, and then increase property taxes by about 80. Is that what you said, meet in the middle? That was
I'm
your
good with
suggestion?
80.
80 was the suggestion, and then 320 in of bond money. That's increasing the receipts by 1.4. And then, if we meet all of Wendy's, requests, that's about 420, right? And so that will be 980 as a difference.
980?
How do I propose, it's, okay. Let's think about something. We can, hold up.
Won't answer.
I just put in the budget, and I made a proposal that with the monies that, with the Sheriff's Department written policy with the RSRO, we could put 11 officers in our schools.
But 3 of them are not ours.
You would have some officers that are school resource officers right now that would not have one of those positions. That is correct.
And what do I do with them, though?
and-
That's the question.
We're talking about the school resource officers program.
Sending 3 of them
We've
home.
got, in the budget right now, we have positions that are not budgeted for next year throughout the county. So it is not fun to have the conversation, guys. But at the end of the day, if we're singling out our budget for school safety and the school resource officer program, and we see that we're spending the amount of monies that we can put 11 officers that are POP certified in our schools, we as elected members have to have that discussion. As you just heard, it's going to cost more. We're going to have to raise receipts. So I mean, there is no other way to look at this, is that it's going to cost us more. And that's for 8. What we just discussed is for 8. So that's my answer.
You propose to make them all retired? I'm asking for clarification. Your proposal is to make them all retired and only work 170-something days?
It's the written policy that is at the Sheriff's Department right now.
For an R, but that
For an
doesn't
R.
mean they have to be an R.
Yeah. Right. If someone that is not.
I put the best out there. I don't care if they're an R or if they're not. And that's what the community wants. You might not want it, but that's what the community wants.
The question is it just for retired? No. If there is somebody out there that is POP certified per Senate Bill 1, if they want to work that position, they can.
Can you not, you can work them without paying them insurance, a POP certified, non-retired without paying their insurance and without paying their retirement? You can't.
If they don't have insurance, if they don't have a retirement already,
Right.
so you wouldn't be paying it.
So that's what I'm saying. They can't be not retired then. They have to be retired under your proposal. I'm okay with going to 11, but. RSRO.
Mm-hmm.
Retired school resource officer. I mean, I was okay with raising our fees. I mean, we hit 1,829 this year. I'm fine with raising it to 1.7. easy.
Where does that leave you on shortfall?
With a subsidy, I would need a 1,275, 250 subsidy. If you raise my fees to 1.7. My total line's 2,975, 250. Which last year he said was 1.6 in a couple of meetings. So now it's 1,375, 250, I think, or 1,275 if we go to $1.7 million subsidy, or $1.7 million fee estimate. That would be with 8. Yeah, it would need to be 495, 250. The subsidy would if we had 11. So it's still less than what has been stated mine is this year. And then you would have 11 instead of 5, because that's what we budgeted for last year was 5. For the 8 or for the 11?
8.
For the 8, it's 1,375, 250. That's if you
Subsidy?
keep the subsidy, or that's if you keep the fees at 1.6.
Yeah, that's at
If you raise them at
Keep the fees at
1.7,
1.6.
it goes
The
down
subsidy
to,
needs to be what?
if you raise it to 1.7, it goes down to 1,275, 250, the subsidy does.
1,375, 250, or 1,275,
Yes.
250.
If
with
they
a
decide to
1.7.
raise the fees. If they'll
Okay.
raise the fees to 1.7.
Okay.
Okay, so then on that one, on this, this one right here, on your end would be that addition.
What's the court want to do?
Well, I mean, if I believed that we could get the guys that we have now and 3 more of them for that school resource proposed budget, I'd be all over it, but I don't believe we can. So that's where, that's truly where we disagree there, and so I feel like
Let me
we
talk just a
need to,
minute, Monty.
all right.
All right, 3-0 with 11. I mean,
Huh? When you say you don't feel, is it because, I mean, explaining, what is it? Is it because you don't?
No, I mean,
think
right
they're-
now, we don't have all retired.
Have we advertised for, I mean, when we have a vacancy, what do you typically do with a vacancy?
we haven't had one.
Well,
But-
when
but
like
let's-
when JT
On
left,
JT, we just moved somebody.
you moved somebody over, but
From
did
over
you
there.
advertise? Did you put it out
No.
there for?
No.
So I'm going to disagree with you and say
I've
that
well,
we
when this came
can
up-
put that out and try to find folks to fill those positions. We haven't tried that yet.
I did try to move that officer back when all this discussion come up with cost to recruit another retired officer. And I've been told no, because they're making 57,000 base where they're at. That's a big decrease. I can still look, obviously. I can hunt all the guys and gals that's retired from my agency to try to get them to come back. But I still think you're still going to have 3 out there that are not retired. But for 8, or for 11, if you want to do 11, my general fund line will be $3,092,450. If you do 11, our fees will go up more from school reimbursements, so you could bump that to 1.8. And then that would bring your subsidy down to 1,292,450.
Sorry, what was the 180 again? I got.
1.8 would be, because we would collect more fees from the school, because you would have 3 more officers. 3,092,450. So if you left it at 1.7, you're looking at 1,392,450 subsidy, or if you take it to 1.8, you'd be at 1,292,450.
Isn't that just a little less than 30,000 over your current budget?
I don't know, I've done so many. It changes every time I come here, so I don't know, I can't remember.
I've got the current down at 3,068,543.
Oh, this year's budget
Yeah.
is $3,060,200.
So for $32,000 more on your budget, we can put 3 more on there?
Yeah, because there was things in last year, I mean, we outfitted 11 cars, 14 cars, so that money's not there. So you've got probably, off the top of my head, several $1,000s there that we're not spending this year that we did spend last year. Or that we're not going to spend next year that we did spend this year.
And Commissioner Spraggs, I want to bring to your attention what we just had to do to raise those receipts, to bring those monies up to where we can do what he's just talking about.
I understand that. I've found most of that, so I totally get it. I worked probably 60 hours on this budget, at least. That's just in the office. So I totally get it. Public safety is of major importance to me, and if we have to cut something else, then so be it.
What else?
I do have a question for Mr. Lovett. Since he's sitting out here, if the 3 additional officers were to happen, school board okay with footing the bill on that for your portion?
We'll make it work. We'll find a way.
Thank you.
Yeah. What else, gentlemen?
Where are we at, just so I know we're playing?
She's gonna have to send that all to us, because I don't, we've,
No, you add it to the fees. It comes to my fees, yeah. That's what I'm saying, bump it up to 1.8.
So it's not part of the 375?
No, well, it's just more.
Right, so he's saying it's
1.8.
if it's 11.
If it's 11.
If it's 11, bump it to 1.8. Yeah, then that adds to the fees
Gotcha.
to offset the subsidy.
So that goes to 1.
Does that add for the reimbursement also?
Say it again.
Is that adding for the reimbursement?
That's what he's talking
Yeah,
about.
Okay.
yeah, the 1.8 would
Okay, I just
be with
wanna make
all
sure.
school reimbursement
Okay.
fees, everything, and then I'm at 3,092,450, so my subsidy would be $1,292,450.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
What would come out of OTA.
Anything else? Eddie, can you explain your raising of your receipts from 1.6 to 1.8?
1.8, it would be I'm already at 1829 this year. 1.6 was a very conservative number. I would have been fine with 1.8, to be honest. But they kept it at 1.6. If we raise it to 1.8, I would have been fine with 1.7. And then if we get from 8 to 11, raise it another 100,000, and then that puts me at 1.8. Because the school reimbursement,
It's it's 1.8 total.
yes.
Yeah, right, that's right, that's
Yeah.
what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's not with the
Do
the
that,
375 or the other school boards. That goes away.
396,
That's
The
gone
1.8
away.
has the 375. and
yes,
All of that, school resource officer line on here would disappear.
yes, yes, yes.
It would go completely away and all go under mine. Yeah.
Anything else? All right.